The following program does not have a normal intro because, let's face it, you think I can afford that now? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Viewers Discretion. I'm your host, Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Lawgic. Woo! It's been a minute. It has been a minute between Rosh Hashanah, as we Americans say, Rosh Hashanah. Israelis say it properly, Rosh Hashanah. We say Rosh Hashanah, which is, you would say, Jewish New Year. And Shabbos and stuff. It's been a minute. And I got to tell you, before I was checking out of here, I think on Tuesday night. Yeah, Tuesday night. That's the last time I streamed. Wow, it's been a minute. I was saying how there's all this news I have to catch up to when I come back in after 3 days. And when I came back in, I got to tell you, there was nothing. Nothing happened. Nothing. I was like, really? Nothing. The only thing I saw was this decision from Judge McAfee. There's a few small things here and there. They're very quiet few days. Very quiet. It's like, I don't know what you guys been talking about. There's been nothing going on. Nothing going on at all. I don't know. Well, anyhow, one thing I did learn about on the day I was leaving is that someone was making a stream about a judgment I got hit with, which it is me. It is me in that judgment. I am the named judgment debtor. I will explain that entire story after I go through the whole McAfee thing. I want to go through McAfee first. And then I plan on walking you through the entire. You need to understand the backstory to understand how it is that I find myself getting hit with such a sizable judgment. Let's face it, $117,000 is nothing to sneeze at. And what it means, I guess, answer any questions that some of you may have about it. What bothered me about some of the reporting on it is that some people took it as an opportunity to impugn my integrity. And that was crap. That was ridiculous. So I was like, all right, I don't like being the story. Part of the reason I pushed off the 100,000 thank you stream as long as I did is because I was like, it just feels like it's very much about me. And I don't like that. So I was like, why would I do this? But when it got to a point that, some people were, perhaps in good faith, perhaps in bad faith, I don't know. And I'm not here to assess other people's motives, but questioning my integrity, I was like, no, that's not cool. That's completely inaccurate, and that's not cool. So but I can understand how someone who doesn't know the story and only hears that side, someone in good faith, people who like me, have been fans of the show for a long time, are like, is what they're saying about you true? And I was like, no. But I need to walk you through exactly what happened. And I will. First, I do want to get into the whole Judge McAfee thing. Because my God, that guy was just an utter. What is such a disappointment. It's so disappointing because he has the intellect. He has the intellect and insight, the judicial intellect in spades. He's a very smart guy. But this is the second time now, which, once bitten, twice shy. This is the second time now that we have seen him stare at terrible corruption and kind of been like, I'm not doing anything about it. Now, what makes him unusual is that most judges are like, I'm not going to have an evidentiary hearing so the entire world can see this corruption. Most people are like, I'm not televising this. You don't get to see the corruption going on in the courtroom, and you don't get to see him asking the judge, him or her, depending on the situation. You don't get to see them asking questions and attacking things with a legal thought process, which is spot on, and then still come to conclusions that you're just like, what? How did that happen? When he handled the evidentiary hearing with Fannie Willis, you have to understand something. that set him apart because at least 4 out of 5 judges would be like, I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. That's what most judges would have done in that scenario, especially freshman judges, especially a freshman judge, because you know it's politically potentially disastrous for your career. So, and it's very easy to just be like, nah. All the news medias are saying that it's garbage. I'm just going to punt it. That's the easy road to take. It's highly unusual to see someone say, no, this has real legs, which it did, as did this DeKalb GOP versus Raffensperger case that we watched the hearing last week. And to say it's got real legs, let's have a hearing, and then you hear stuff which is just mind-blowing. I mean, mind-blowing. And he figured, okay, this is exactly what we were looking to hear. Now we get to the juicy decision, giving us what we want. And what happens in Fannie Willis? What does he do? He's like, let me see how I can split this baby. One of them has to leave. Somehow that's going to repair the terrible damage and harm to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office and the appearance of impropriety and the gross forensic misconduct where she got up and basically was lambasting defendants in a black church as if the defendants and their lawyers hate black people. I mean, that's essentially what she was saying when she got up there and gave her Sunday sermon. And it's something that's completely inexplicable, inexcusable, sanctionable. Frankly, it should have cost her job because it's so completely improper. And that part he just sort of poo-pooed. Then she gets up on the stand and she says all sorts of like ridiculous explanations that make no sense. So much so that he even calls out an odor of mendacity. Nathan, with all the forensic evidence of there being thousands of text messages at a point in time when they don't have a romantic relationship, visits to her house 3 o'clock in the morning, all sorts of craziness when they don't have a relationship and no one else is visiting. And he comes back with like, I think one of them's got to go. Just doesn't have the cojones to actually follow through. And I think that's what we're going to see with respect. That's what as we're going through this decision here as to what happened with the Dekalb GOP. So in case you didn't get to watch the evidentiary hearing with me, you don't know what this case is about. I'll give you a very brief synopsis. The Dekalb GOP brought an action as petitioners against Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. And they said, look, you followed the law with respect to hiring Dominion, but implicit in the law, what is very obviously implicit in the law is there are certain standards and guidelines like the EAC, and we're going to see in the decision, he's going to reference some of them, that dictate that we have to ensure that there's actually going to be integrity, security. So you can't have some schmo in Barbados or in Russia or in China or in Fulton County or in DC accessing, logging in there, and literally changing ballot counts. And that the encryption key, which is basically the key to the entire election, is like basically password. Like your password is password, ! And it's something that countless people have access to. It's not literally password, but it's like, I mean, it's just a joke. It's a joke. Anyway, we're going to see his decision, which is an utter embarrassment. It's just a joke. It's terrible. This is pathetic. It's really pathetic. That's pretty funny. Let's pull up my Rumble here. All right. Where was we? Yes. Anyways, we'll Trump 2024. Okay. So we're gonna go through that decision in just a moment. Yeah. I wanted to share with you the only other news stories that I saw was Trump returning to Butler, Pennsylvania, which I think strategically was a really smart move. He needs to seal down Pennsylvania. And he seems as if his numbers are only improving in all the battleground states, which is obviously very encouraging. It was cool that he had Elon Musk show up there and basically do his thing. If you missed it, which I don't know how you could have, but maybe you did. Maybe you did. This was Elon making his first appearance at a Trump rally. This was in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday.
And free speech is the bedrock of democracy. And if people don't know what's going on, if they don't know the truth, how can you make an informed vote? You must have free speech in order to have democracy. That's why it's the First Amendment. And the Second Amendment is there to ensure that we have the First Amendment. And free speech.
He's not a public speaker. You can tell he's not a public speaker. But you can't argue with the logic. You can't argue with the logic. He came out there calling himself Dark MAGA. Are you Dark MAGA? Dark MAGA? I had to look up what it was. What did I find that was? I was like, oh, I actually had an article. What is Dark MAGA? It actually is a phrase. It's not just after what Blinken just announced, I'll be surprised if anyone votes for Kamala Walls. Well, now I have to see that. Now you're distracting me in a good way. I'm not complaining, Kimmy. Oh, 157 million to Lebanon in humanitarian aid. Apparently, Dark MAGA is not a phrase he made up. In case you're wondering what Dark MAGA is, which you should be, because frankly, I didn't even know what it was, and I consider myself as MAGA as anybody. This is the definition. This is the explanation. This goes back to 2022. Here's an article I found on this. Let's check that out. It's not just a black hat. No, Mark. No, it's not just a black hat. It's more than that. Tim Squirrel, ISD's head of communications and editorial, spoke to Newsweek about Dark MAGA, a new aesthetic being promoted by both Trump supporters and more extreme political groups. Newsweek described Dark MAGA as the following, quote, more of a meme than a political slogan, Dark MAGA is a post-alt-right aesthetic that promotes an authoritarian version of Trump in dystopian, Terminator-like images. In some, the Trump Tower is painted entirely in black, and the former president is seen piercing through the screen with blue laser eyes. This is the latest attempt of the alt-right in disarray since the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally that ended the murder of a counter-protester, Heather Heyer, in 2017 to rebrand itself and reunify its various factions. It's broadly the same set of people engaged in the same kind of activities with the aim of grabbing attention. The secondary aim of dark MAGA that Tim also spoke about is to launder more extreme narratives and aesthetics into the mainstream. So that's what it is. It's to launder. I don't know what the hell. I'll tell you this much. I don't know what dark MAGA is. I know this is not it. This is what the left wants you to believe it is, but this is not it. But him calling himself dark MAGA, I don't know if it's because he was wearing a black hat. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I know this is not what it is. I don't know what it is. Do any of you know what dark MAGA is? Had you heard of dark MAGA like more than 48 hours ago? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Seriously, don't worry about it. It was about a black hat show. I don't think Elon knew about the Newsweek BS story. Maybe. You think he was just trying to be funny? Like he was like, like dark MCU characters or whatever? Perhaps. It does jive with his sense of humor. It jives very, very well with his sense of humor. Anyway, and I'll give you some more good news before we deal with McAfee and his depressing cowering. I say. I call you out, sir, for cowering. Shame. It was terrible what he did. Oh my gosh, so disappointing. I'll give you some good news before we go there. I haven't been following this story, Kathy. I know I was supposed to, but no one gave it. No one. The teacher never assigned it, and it just didn't end up in my feed. It just never came across my feed. I'm like, maybe I'm following the wrong people. I don't know. That would make sense. They need to rip off everything. Was Black MAGA also? All right. Anyway, this will buck you right up. In case you're feeling down in the dumps about McAfee, this will buck you right up.
Look at whether voters believe we're on the right track or the wrong track. I think that this sort of gets at a problem.
28% think the U.S. is on the right track. 28%. 28%.
For Kamala Harris's campaign, just 28% of Americans think the U.S. is on the right track. And I want you to put that into perspective, right? When the incumbent party loses the election, look at that. It's just 25%. That looks a heck of a lot like that 28%, right? That currently think the country is on the right track. When the White House party wins, i.e. Kamala Harris's party, the Democrats, 42% on average think that the country is on the right track. This 25% looks a lot more like this 28%. It doesn't look anything like this 42%. This, to me, is a bad sign for Kamala Harris's campaign. The bottom line is it looks a lot more like a loser than it does like a winner when it comes to the country being on the right track.
Well, John Berman's going to try and find some silver lining here.
Can an incumbent party win with numbers like this?
Yeah, so if we look historically
They can.
speaking, right, and we say, okay, say the U.S. is on the right track, the incumbent party, when they win. Today, again, it's just 28%. Look throughout history, right? 96, 88, 04, 12, 84. In all these instances, far more than 28% thought that the country was on the right track. 39 was the lowest back in 1996.
And that's because Clinton was stealing elections back then.
We got upwards of 47% in 84. Of course, that was a blowout, right, for Ronald Reagan. So there is no historical precedent for the White House party.
Oh, wait, isn't that an amazing thing when you think about it? He won all but one state, and half the country, 53%, thought we were on the wrong track. How is that possible? I don't understand. What are you starting with? Are you starting with like 40% thinking you're on the wrong track? The dude literally got like 500, and I think my recollection is he had 517 electoral votes. Something like that. It was something like that. Like it was insane. It was well over 400. That I'm positive of. Well over 400. How is it possible that 53% of the country, and I'm talking about 1984, 53% of the country thought we're on the wrong track? I don't understand these numbers at all.
Winning another term in the White House when just 28% of the country thinks that we're on the right track. John, simply put, it would be historically unprecedented.
So is there any good news or
any silver lining, please, for the love of God? Our viewers are just like they're tuning out. They're switching over to MSNBC. Give us something, please.
interpretation or prism you can look through, or Democrats can say, well, maybe it's okay?
Okay, so let's look back to the last midterm, because sometimes
Was there a president running in the last midterm?
history is made to be broken, Mr. Berman. All right, say the country is on the right track in midterms. Democrats had a good midterm despite this. The old low for the country saying that we were on the right track was 27% back in 1994. Of course, that was a blowout, right? The Republicans romped over the Democrats. And
These are midterms. He's pulling up midterms.
Bill Clinton. But this particular past midterm, look, just 26% said that the country was on the right track, and Democrats did pretty gosh darn good.
They lost. They lost seats in 2022. What do you mean they did pretty gosh darn good? They lost the House. I know that wasn't the red wave everyone thought.
Maybe we've entered a new political environment where Donald Trump is so unpopular that these historical norms, these historical measures that we look at don't actually mean what we think anymore. I'll tell you this much. Kamala Harris better hope that's the case, because otherwise this right track, wrong direction situation will not work out in their favor.
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go. So I thought you might enjoy that. I saw that. I was like, watching the Cope. Watching the Cope is always awesome. I love watching the Cope. I do. I enjoy watching the Cope. These people are bad people. Bad things. Bad things. God should wish bad things on them. All right. Not that any of you should do anything to them, and I mean that sincerely. All right. All right. Let's get to McAfee. Let's cover that. This was the Dekalb. Is it Dekalb or Dekalb? No, Dekalb County Republican Party Inc. versus Brad Raffensperger. Final order on respondents' motion to dismiss. Applicant, Dekalb County Republican Party, seeks the extraordinary remedy of a writ of mandamus. Okay. That's not a good sign. Asking this court to compel the Georgia Secretary of State to comply with OCGA 21-2300A and other election-related regulations. Now, I understand that conceptually, a mandamus is basically the court directing someone to do something. And you can say that that's when you're calling that extraordinary remedy, is it because of the nature, because of mandamuses in general are considered an extraordinary remedy, or is asking a Georgia Secretary of State to just comply with the law really that extraordinary? Because I wouldn't think so. I would think that saying, hey, follow the law is not that extraordinary. That would seem to be like, sort of what courts are there to do. You would think. But I can understand the notion that a writ of mandamus is one thing for them to, courts are usually more remedial than proactive. And this is proactive. So in that sense, perhaps that's what he means by extraordinary. Specifically, the applicant contends the secretary has committed a gross abuse of discretion and failed his ongoing duty to ensure the Dominion voting systems used to conduct elections in Georgia comply with the certifications issued by the EAC, Elections Assistance Commission. These certifications direct, among many other things, that encryption keys used to secure the collection systems be stored in compliance with the voluntary voting system guidelines. So we already have two different manuals when you're looking through this. You have the voluntary voting system guidelines and the EAC references. It's not, and they used to be voluntary. They became mandatory instead of voluntary. Originally they were called voluntary, but in this context, once they've now become part of the EAC, that now makes it something that's mandatory. It's no longer voluntary, and that those encryption keys, and this is really the key over here. We're talking about that these encryption keys are basically so widely known, as I mentioned this during the hearing, that apparently, like, they were talking about making the encryption key like a T-shirt. Like that's according to the petition. They said it's so widely known that in mockery, people were thinking about making the encryption key a T-shirt. So, and it has to be stored properly, obviously changed and stored properly. In violation of this requirement, an applicant alleges multiple county systems store encryption keys in an unprotected plain text. What does that mean, unprotected plain text? It means instead of it being some sort of like coded type of thing, you can actually read. And that's it. That's the key. The court issued a mandamus nisi. Mandamus nisi is like, and set the matter for trial within 30 days. The secretary then answered, moved for dismissal pursuant to OCGA 911-12. The court declined to issue a pretrial ruling. The case proceeded to a bench trial after both parties waived the right to have a jury deciding factual disputes. Following the complete presentation of the applicant's case, the secretary renewed his motion to dismiss. This was a renewal which, frankly, I was hoping he would lose and thought he should. After considering the evidence, applicable law, and argument of counsel, the court grants the motion in parts. Okay. Now, I want you to consider this. What evidence, when you're reading through this, what evidence is he considering? Because most of the stuff that favors the state are things he already knew before he had the hearing. This is what's so frustrating, why I refer to it as cowardice. He knew. I mean, there was no factual evidence put in favor of. Well, let's see what he says. Let's go through it. Dark Market has been a thing. Think Batman, Retribution. You thought Dark Brandon was original? I never assumed. I just don't know. I don't know what it's. It's just a phrase, Dark MAGA. I don't know what that means. Maybe I'm too old. Secretary raises two preliminary defenses that would defeat the petition without addressing the substantive issues: that the applicant prejudicially delayed the filing of this petition, and that another remedy exists at law. Okay, considering the first, the undersigned finds no inexcusable delay. So there's no on the part of the applicant. Okay. As a quasi-equitable remedy, mandamus may be barred by gross laches. Laches means delay. Laches also refers to referred to as prejudicial delay. Depends on a consideration of the particular circumstances, including such factors as the length of the delay and the claimant's assertion of rights. How long does it take? What kind of excuse do you have? Whether that harmed the ability to maintain evidence on disputed matters, and the opportunity for the claimant to have acted sooner. So those are the four factors that they're going to look at to see whether there's gross laches, which he's saying there is no gross laches here, meaning the petition was timely brought. More than the mere passage of time should be considered, an analysis is essentially a balancing of equities, taking all relevant facts into account, quoting Collier. In the context of mandamus, few examples exist that apply these factors. So it's not like I had a lot to look back on as far as when will gross laches be a way that I can get out of dealing with this. None have explained the distinction of what constitutes a gross delay as opposed to the ordinary standard. In other words, you have regular laches, now you have gross laches, which would seem like you were really delaying a lot. In the absence of direction, the undersigned simply takes this to mean that the fact is justifying finding of laches must be particularly egregious to bar an action for mandamus. Okay. Regardless, even under the non-heightened standard, the evidence established that laches should not apply here. The chair of the Dekalb Republican Party credibly testified that while she possessed a general awareness of the Georgia's voting system encryption keys, as they asked her, why didn't you come in here sooner? So she had a general awareness of the encryption keys as early as June 2023. She did not make a connection to EAC certification standards and the secretary's alleged ongoing legal duty to remain compliant with those standards until conducting further personal research. So she's like, look, I knew that there's a problem with the encryption keys. I just didn't realize that there was a law requiring him, the Secretary of State, to actually do something about this. That's why I didn't come forward a year ago. Nor did the applicant retain counsel or consult any expert witness about the merits of this petition until recently. The court cannot impute these individuals' knowledge to the applicant without some proven connection. While the applicant may have acted sooner, this would be a question of weeks or months, not years. So it's not like we're talking about a great deal of time here. In addition, there is no allegation of lost evidence. Only the delay has prejudiced Secretary of Election project files for each county have already been created for the impending November 24 election. And the last-minute mandated changes would be impracticable. It's going to be really hard it's really, really hard for us to comply with the law. How are we supposed to do this? I don't understand. Now you want us to, we didn't know we were going to have to comply with the law for this election. That's crazy. That's not fair. Who knew that we have to have secure voting systems in November 24? I mean, are you really that's such a crazy burden for you to ask the court to throw on us. But they say it'd be impracticable, if not impossible. These grave concerns of prejudice should the petition be granted, especially as the next election day is 30 or so days away, are not unmerited, but also not controlling. Secretary did not establish that this potential prejudice would be any different had the petition been filed earlier this year. They didn't prove that, like, hey, if you came to me in May, we would have done things differently. You didn't provide any evidence of that so far. Further relief sought would apply to every election cycle hereafter. It wouldn't just be now. This is going to be every election going on. And the court could obviate any immediate harms by delaying the remedy. In theory, the court could sit back and say, no, let's screw Trump and fix our elections for the future. They could do that. Because the proven length of delay on the part of the applicant was minimal and any resulting prejudicial delay remedial, laches does not bar this petition. So, okay. So far, if you're the petitioner, this is looking okay. All right. The undersigned also disagrees with the Secretary's additional defense that the applicant possesses an adequate alternative remedy at law under OCGA 21-2520 via post-election challenge, which is what he's like, you can fix it afterwards if there's really a problem. One of the issues that they brought up, which I just want to call to your attention, is that they pointed out that when you have the encryption key, that enables you to go into this system and not leave any footprints. You have basically overriding control, and no one knows who's been in or out of there. Literally, we don't know if there's some team of high school geeks in China who are like screwing around with our Georgia elections, and we would never know if they went in there, played around with the algorithm, completely distorting everything, and changed. We would never know. No one would ever know that they'd been there. It leaves literally no footprint. Such a joke. An alternative legal remedy is only adequate if equally convenient, completely, and beneficial. Applicant first points out the election contest may only be raised by any person who was a candidate or an aggrieved elector. The applicant being neither, this door appeared to forever remain shut, and the secretary did not rebut this argument. The point here is this. You're telling me I can come after the election and raise this? I wouldn't even have jurisdiction. I wouldn't have standing at that point. I have standing now. I wouldn't have standing after the election. So no, I cannot get relief on November 6th or November 10th or December 1st or whenever we realize that there's been some sort of wonky thing going on with our election. Even if the applicant or one of its members in an individual capacity had standing to file an election challenge, such an option is not an equivalent remedy. So at least he recognizes this, that standing to file an election challenge is not an equivalent remedy to the stitch in time saves 9 theory, says that this is not going to fix it afterwards. In addition to significant procedural difficulties inherent in the post-election process, there's no guarantee the successful election challenge will cause the secretary to change his handling of encryption keys. We'll still have the same problem next time. You'll say, oh, okay, this election was a problem, but I'll keep using the same system next time. Moreover, the peace of mind that may come from a more secure election process is a separate relief than that achieved by an election challenge, which cleans up a mess already made. So he's saying it's not really the same relief. This is a very interesting. See, that's why I said this guy is smart. He's not at all a stupid man. He's a smart judge. He's making this sentence here. This is like genuine insight. He's like, look, don't tell me that the ability to fix an election after the fact is the same relief as fixing a problem beforehand, because there's a certain peace of mind that, hey, I'm going into this election that it's not effed up before we even start. And I don't have that peace of mind if you're not fixing it and you tell me, well, you'll be able to fix it later on. That's ridiculous. It's a very insightful point he's making. While a successful contest can result in a new election, the do-over will always be clouded by proverbial asterisk. The consequence of the applicant's security concerns are at this point purely hypothetical, but this alone does not defeat its claim. If the secretary is neglecting a legal duty compellable by mandamus, the undersigned believes that the applicant has every right to insist on performance in advance of an election, regardless of whether the potential harm will ever be realized. So far, it sounds like it's going really well for the petitioner, right? Everything is like, the 2 defenses raised by the Secretary of State, loser. Gross laches, losers. Alternative remedies, loser. Okay. Having concluded that neither laches nor alternative legal remedy is present here, the court turns to the heart of the petition. Mandamus may only be issued if the applicant has a clear legal right to such relief. Okay. A clear legal right only arises when an official or agency is required, not simply authorized by law to perform an act. So if you think about it, there might be certain things you're permitted to do and other things you're obligated to do. Court is not allowed to force you to do things that you're permitted to do. They're only allowed to force you to do things that you're obligated to do. So a clear legal right only arises where an official or agency is required, not simply authorized by law to perform an act, either expressly or by necessary implication. So it's definitely not express. His duty to act here is definitely not express. But the key here is the argument that the applicant made, that Dekalb, the Republican Party Inc. made, was that it's clearly implied. Here, the applicant contends that OCGA 21-2300 imposes an ongoing legal duty on the Secretary to maintain EAC certification of its voting equipment. Let's look at the statutes. Okay, this is the key statute. And this is the key thing that they were like, you have to follow this, and you're not following it. And I want the court to force you to follow it. The judge is about to say that this is not something that I can force him to follow because technically he has followed it. So, what do those provisions say? Number one, the equipment used for casting and counting votes in county, state, and federal elections shall be the same in each county in the state and be provided to each county and state as determined by the Secretary of State. Okay. As soon as possible, once such equipment is certified by the Secretary of State as safe and practicable for use, all federal, state, and county general primaries and general elections, as well as special primaries and special elections in the state of Georgia, shall be conducted with the use of scanning ballots marked by electronic ballot markers and tabulated by using ballot scanners for voting in the polls and for absentee ballots cast in person, unless otherwise authorized by law. Provided, however, that such electronic ballot markers shall produce paper ballots which are marked with the elector's choices in a format readable by the elector. So, first part here that is key is saying this part here. As soon as possible, once such equipment is certified by the Secretary of State safe and practicable for use. So this, they're calling this a temporal duty. At some point, he has to do that. The state shall furnish a uniform system of electronic ballot markers and ballot scanners for use in each county as soon as possible. Such equipment shall be certified by United States EAC prior to purchase, lease, or acquisition. This is the key thing here. Does it have to? And the question that he's about to get into is the Secretary of State has to certify it under number 2. It's got to be certified by the EAC prior to purchase, lease, or acquisition. What does that mean? What does the EAC say? EAC says you have to safely store your encryption keys. So what he basically did was, in his opinion, he comes to a conclusion that this is a safe storage of encryption keys. In plain language, this statute imposes a temporal limitation that only requires EAC certification prior to the purchase, lease, or acquisition of election equipment. Similarly, the Secretary's safe and practical certification is a one-time occurrence. So this one-time occurrence, this may have happened, 20 years ago, but it's a one-time occurrence. Nothing in this statute indicates the imposition of a continuing duty, and the undersigned finds no ambiguity on the point. Really? Really? The VVSG may require ongoing compliance, but the statute does not. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, since the EAC doesn't expressly say that there has to be an ongoing compliance with VVSG standards, he doesn't have to make sure that the encryption keys are good anymore. He could theoretically, they could literally take out a billboard and say, this is the encryption key for the Georgia election, and that's totally fine under the law. What a ridiculous... Well, let me finish. Deploying the tool bag of statutory interpretive canons does not lead to a different conclusion. For example, the applicant does not point to any other statute modifying or clarifying the provisions that should be read in paramateria, meaning like how to interpret it, that statute different than what the plain meaning is, nor is there an enacted statement of legislative purpose. Although the General Assembly recently amended this section in 2024, it left these specific provisions untouched. The applicant primarily relies on a policy-grounded conclusion. The absence of an ongoing duty renders the provision an empty gesture. Meaning, what is the point to this statute saying that you have to make sure that it's safe and practicable, meaning safe, secure, and practicable, and you have to certify that prior? Why would you have to certify prior to purchase, lease, or acquisition, and then not have to make sure that it maintains that standard, that it's safe and practicable? What's the point? What the hell would be the point of this statute? So it makes that statute an empty gesture. Yeah, okay, fine. For 10 minutes, the system that they're going to buy is going to be totally fine, and then it's going to break down, and he's going to certify, and then it'll break down, and they'll never do anything to make sure it's secure. And, oh, he's done his job. He's done his job. Go on your way. Don't worry. So who cares if the election is easily tampered with by some 14-year-old who spent 20 minutes in a computer class? That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. He did his job. Everything's fine here. What are you complaining about? He did what he had to do. It is true that a court should consider the results and consequences of any proposed construction, not to so construe a statute as will result in unreasonable or absurd consequences not contemplated by the legislature. So you're not supposed to just leave statutes as being an empty gesture, because you're supposed to think, what's the purpose of this statute? But this interpretive principle cannot be used to change the text and substitute judicial preferences for that of the legislature, and nothing tells us that the legislature intends to include a specific ongoing requirement. Unbelievable. So what is the point then? What the hell? What is a reasonable interpretation here as to what the point of that statute is, Judge McAfee? Tell us. I'm very, very curious. What do you think is a reasonable interpretation, Scott? What's a reasonable interpretation? The alleged absurdity here is not one that no reasonable person could intend. Really? Something that may seem odd is not absurd. Nor is it one that can meet the applicant's standards by changing or supplying a particular word or phrase whose inclusion or omission was obviously a technical or ministerial error. In essence, this is not a statute that does not make sense. It's simply one that draws the line of election equipment security at a point where the applicant vehemently disagrees. Not where the applicant vehemently disagrees, where common sense vehemently disagrees, where logic dictates that makes no sense. Why would you do that? What is the point to having a secure election system that we certify as being secure 9 years ago? That's considered now you've done your job. Oh, everything's fine here. Everything's totally fine here. How is that possibly a logical way to read that statute? No, the point is, even before you buy it, you need to know that it's compliant. Unbelievable. It's not a point where the applicant, it's not a point in time where the applicant disagrees. It's at a point that it's the only thing that there's no other logical understanding for the purpose. Having concluded this statute, the sole statutory basis on the line's position does not impose an ongoing duty on the secretary. The applicant's position unravels. The election equipment was certified by the EAC in 2019 and remains certified to this day. Oh, so I guess it's going to be good 40 years from now also. It was certified in 2019, so it's fine 40 years from now also. What the hell does that even mean? The applicant did not present any evidence concerning the storage of encryption keys at the time the secretary certified the equipment as safe and practical for use. In other words, you can't show that at the time that he did it, it wasn't compliant. Although applicant may firmly believe that secretary's current processes are nonsensical and appalling, as is this decision, and good faith concerns over how to better secure elections shouldn't be taken seriously, this matter is currently one that must be deferred to the policymaking branches. Go to your local lawmaker, go to your local state assemblyman or senator. In the face of contentions that a public officer has committed a gross abuse of discretion and neglected his legal duties, the court is especially mindful of its own. There's no clear legal right to the applicant's demand relief. Petition must be dismissed, so order this 4th day of October. Unbelievable. So yeah, the defenses. So this is what's so aggravating about this. He says the defense of gross laches that the petitioner took too long to come here. That's not a viable defense. She didn't take too long to come here. She came in time. Everything was on time. The Secretary of State's claim that, oh, don't worry about this relief. You can't have mandamus because there's other relief they can have. No, there is no other relief. This is the only relief they can get. But this statute, because it doesn't say that there's an ongoing duty, it just says at some point in time, you have to certify it. As long as it's certified at some point in time that it's actually, safe and secure, then even if the wheels come off the bus completely, there's no ongoing duty that can be read into that statute. And accordingly, even though that makes the statute completely stupid and ridiculous and nonsensical and absurd in the extreme, especially when you consider they didn't even do it for this election cycle. He didn't certify for this election cycle. He certified in 2019. So he didn't even certify it now. Is this same certification going to be valid in 2028, in 2032, in 2036, in 2040? Is it going to be the same certification going to be valid in 2200 when you talk about like 20 years from now when this system is so completely thoroughly outdated as all electronics and computer systems are? That's considered certified that now you don't do anything. And this is just insane. Insane. It's an insane decision. And this was what's so frustrating. I told you, he's a very smart judge. He knows what he's doing. He's a very intelligent judge. What evidence was adduced at this hearing that helped lead him to this conclusion? Because if this really was his finding, this is a legal argument. You don't need to have an evidentiary hearing. Why have an evidentiary hearing, Scott? Why did you have an evidentiary hearing? Why did you do it? What facts came out? Because that's what he wrote here. He said, I considered all the facts and the evidence adduced at this thing. Really? Really? That's what he wrote here. After considering the evidence, applicable law, and argument of counsel. What evidence? There's a little number there. In supplemental briefing, applicant moves for remission of applicants' exhibits 1 through 5. I email secretary objects on grounds of untimeliness. Finding these exhibits do not affect the conclusion of the order and the interest of completing the record. The court reopens the evidence for the sole purpose of admitting these exhibits. The applicant is directed to provide marked copies to the court reporter. What evidence? Why did you need to take any evidence at all? This is a legal conclusion. You don't have to have a hearing about, and basically, by the way, the whole hearing was pretty much a how-to break into Georgia's voting systems. It was a step-by-step guide. Here's how you too can get the encryption key. This is how you do it. In case, like, the ones who are in remedial, in remedial hacking class, as opposed to advanced hacking class, so that the slower students can basically have a step-by-step guide provided for them during the course of this evidentiary hearing. We don't want to keep it. That's what equity is. Everyone should have a chance. Look, some kids are not as smart. We need to give them a step-by-step guide how to hack into the Georgia election system. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. So why have an evidentiary hearing? This is a legal question. Do I have a power to reinterpret or to apply mandamus on this statute, or is it a temporal duty, meaning fixed in one point in time, or is it an ongoing duty based on what the statute says? That's not an evidentiary hearing. That's a legal conclusion as to how to interpret the statute. Why did you have an evidentiary hearing? It makes no sense. Let me get some of your comments here. All right. A floss of some sort, emoticon in your face. Okay. No, that was when it was certified. That when it was certified, it was safe storage of keys. And then if they gut the entire system so that there's no security at all, he has no duty at all to act. Can they appeal? Yeah, they can appeal. I'm sure they have. I'm sure that if they haven't yet, then they've been furiously working on it this weekend. Joe, question. Do you agree when a governor of state declares state of emergency, it temporarily suspends legislative action of law? I believe it does. Powers clause. When you say legislative action of law, I'm not sure what you mean when you word it this way. Obviously, not all laws are suspended, but I'm not sure what you mean when you say legislative action. It's not like all laws, a state of emergency. It means, oh, okay, that means that now it's totally okay to engage in arson or any other violent crime because, well, it's a state of emergency. So it's chaos time. It's the witching hour. It's what's that? What was that movie where everyone goes? It's Red Hour. That's not what it means. It probably would depend on the language. I'm sure that every state has their own statutes as the ramifications of a state of emergency. This is not something that's I think is subjective interpretation. I'm sure every state has it well spelled out that in a state of emergency, a declaration of a state of emergency has the following impacts automatically. So I'm not sure I agree with your assessment there. Next time a contractor installs a lock and locks only one time, guess my house is apparently. So update of EOC should require disclosure of full election machine and software before certifying public. Time to open source election machines. Yes. Not EOC, EAC. Yes. No, it's got to have it has to have an ongoing certification. There's been a duty on them to maintain ongoing compliance with safety and security. It's really not that confusing. The argument on appeal would be we had no way to oppose original certification because we had no access to machines as public to find faults. That's one argument you could make. That's one argument you could make, that it's like, how are we supposed to verify that he complied? There's no oversight there to know that it ever complied with those standards. You could also argue in theory, I'm trying to think if I was handling the appeal here, they're obviously going to be arguing that there's no logical reading to this statute if it's just a one-time lock. Like as Kathy pointed out, that's like saying your door can lock just on the day that they show the contractor puts the house together, and then it never locks again, which is it's obviously nonsensical. But I'm trying to think. I had a thought about another theory as to beyond that which was raised, and your point here, this point you raise, Elegant, that, well, how are we supposed to know that? There's a contractual theory that there's a contract that, and which he just completely ignores, and this is one of the arguments that they raise, that there's a contractual duty. Dominion, when they sign this contract, said they're going to maintain compliance with EAC. Now, that duty is owed to the state of Georgia. So you can come in there in theory and say that the state of Georgia is not holding Dominion to this standard. But that might be a whole brand new application. I don't know if you can weave that into this application and bring that up on appeal. There is reference made to it. I only know about it because it was brought in the petition. But that's a separate legal argument where you say, look, Dominion, when they got the contract from Raffensperger and the state of Georgia, Raffensperger is not acting individually, they're acting on behalf of the people. Dominion committed under the contract they were going to maintain compliance with the EAC, which means that they committed contractually that they're going to make sure that encryption keys are properly stored. So there's a duty on them to ensure that they are proper, that there's actual proper encryption in Georgia. And frankly, if you are Dominion, you should be concerned about a potential lawsuit that would be brought. That could be, you made our, but how would you ever show damages? You can't prove someone went through there and actually did something. It's a mess. It's really a mess. It's also not logical to say that they're certified every time, every day. That's not what anyone is saying. The point is, has to be reasonable steps taken. There's not a claim that any steps were taken to ensure compliance since 2019, in the last 4 years. All right, thanks for telling me. He didn't, for one reason or another, he didn't address it in his motion, and he dismissed. So you tell me. I don't know. But that's the other argument that I thought of, that they can raise the contractual element potentially on appeal. Question is whether they have standing, to raise a contractual issue. So I'm not sure that they would. It's hard to understand. Finding their standing would be kind of tricky. I'm a resident of Georgia, and this is a contract that's designed to inure to my benefit. It'd be tough. But if you are a Dominion, I guess you have to be concerned about lawsuits if you don't do something to shore it up. I mean, Dominion knows what's happening here. They know about this lawsuit, obviously. So if they take no steps to shore up their system, they have to recognize that they're likely going to get hit with a whole bunch of lawsuits from residents of Georgia saying you effed up our elections, then you failed to, you breached the contract and screwed up our elections. Now perhaps they might rely on the fact that Brad Raffensperger is going to give them a wink, wink, great election, most secure election ever. Idiocy. I don't know. It's very, very frustrating. Like I said, I don't understand why there was an evidentiary hearing. If this is what you're going to do, Scott, if this was the road you're going to go down, what is the point? What is the point? It could also be cowardice. That is like, I don't want to mess with Raffensperger. I don't want to draw political ire. If I say this, in that case, it's I don't know. Attaching motives in a situation like this is very speculative. It's very speculative because I'm dealing with people who I've never met before. But it smells like cowardice to me. It smells like big time cowardice. It's like, I don't want to put my neck on the line and start telling Brad Raffensperger what he has to do. And it's very frustrating because we all saw how completely what cheesecloth type of wrappings they have around their election system. I mean, this is a joke. The analogy they used in the petition was this is like having the world's most secure safe and putting the combination on the outside of the door. Like, what are you doing? For all we know, there have been changes to the algorithm already that we don't know about. They could be there now. No one knows. Ridiculous. Getting a headache just thinking about it. Ugh. All right. And speaking of headaches, let's go through this. Let's go through a $117,000 judgment that, yes, I am now currently saddled with. In order for you to understand how this story unfolds, you need to know a little bit about my life history, my professional history. So I'm going to give you the full story. Get your popcorn, settle in, listen up. Oh, I don't even want to think about that. I don't want to think about that. We're all speculating about what that's going to do. There's no way to know what the hurricane's going to do. I don't know. At the end of the day, it's a good time to find faith. Pray to God. Pray to God everything works out. You're going to hear me use that phrase a lot, probably with the rest of this stream. Pray to God everything works out. Believe it or not, that's not a hopeless. I don't say that out of hopelessness. I say that because, as most of you know, I'm very religious, very strong belief in God. And I think at the end of the day, all of our efforts are futile but for his assistance. We're supposed to do our best. And we do our best. But at the end of the day, we're all just puppets. So let me tell you about a company called Recovery of Judgment. Back in 2012, I was a solo practitioner. And I had my own little small practice. I focused on a few clients who had multiple cases. And I was looking to find a new business to get involved in. And I stumbled on this website where you could buy a business. And I saw someone was selling a judgment execution company. So I was intrigued. I figured this is, not just a business, but it's business like law related. So I could probably add value here. Not that I had engaged in much judgment execution prior there too. Very limited. So I contacted the guy and I met with him. I'm just identifying. His first name is Sean. And I met with Sean. And when I met with him, he's much younger than me. He's like half my age. Now he's a little older than half my age, but he was like 20. This guy is friggin' genius. He is. He's a brilliant guy. He's a good guy. Very brilliant guy. And he starts a lot of different businesses, and he's got a certain entrepreneurial ability about him that he just picks up things very quickly, understands how to make money, and he saw that there was a need for competent judgment execution. And I sat down, I met with him, and he was looking to sell his business. And I said, I don't want to buy it out from under you. I want to become partners with you. Because I was like, this guy understands how to create successful businesses. I was like, I think he's 20 years old. He probably understands more about creating a business than I do. Perhaps more than I'll ever know. He just has a certain gift in that arena. We negotiated terms and we came to terms and became partners. This is roughly 2012. Some of the dates and times may be off a little bit here, but I'm giving you to the best of my knowledge and recollection. Because recognize we're going back now 12 years. And all events here, all relevant events, the most recent ones happened 7 years ago. So what do you do when you're a judgment execution company? Well, first thing you need to do is you need to come up with protocols and a system for how you're going to efficiently execute on judgments. He already had several judgments that he had assigned to recovery of judgment. That was the name of the company, Recovery of Judgment. So the process that we use, and this becomes important, the process we used was someone goes to court. And this is what you need to understand. You go to court and you sue someone and you win. Now you have a judgment. A judgment is a piece of paper which gives you legal power to try and seize that debtor's asset up to the amount of the judgment plus interest as accrued. So it's a legal power that you have that you didn't have before the judgment is entered. That power enables you to garnish wages. It enables you to seize assets. There's a lot of different means of trying to, you could freeze bank accounts and take the money out of it. And there's all sorts of legal processes as to how the steps involved in getting that done. So one of the things that we did, part of our method of operation was we would have a judgment creditor. A person would get a judgment. They'd be unsuccessful in collecting it because it's very hard to collect on judgments. It's very, very tricky. 4 out of 5 judgments, roughly 79% of judgments that are entered nationally, the judgment creditor never collects a single penny of that judgment. That is an astonishingly high number. At least those are the numbers that I saw in 2012. Maybe it's improved since then. I doubt it. But it's very hard to execute on judgments. It's not an easy thing to do. A lot of lawyers are great at getting judgments. Executing on judgment is a far more difficult task. It requires a great deal of patience, investigation, and a lot of casting of nets. Okay. So part of our methodology is we said anyone who wants us to execute on a judgment for them, they will assign their judgment, enter an assignment of the judgment from the creditor to recovery of judgment. So now recovery of judgment steps into the shoes, the company steps into the shoes of the judgment creditor. And we ended up over the course of time having thousands of judgments that ended up being assigned. So John Smith goes to small claims court, gets $4,000 judgment. They can't find anything on it, and we would be contractually bound that whatever we managed to collect, a percentage of that we would keep for ourselves, and the rest we would distribute to the original judgment creditor. So we would be stepping into the shoes of the judgment creditor and form a contractual agreement where we are now obligated that if we are successful, if we're not successful, then we don't have to pay anything. But to the extent that we're successful in collecting a particular judgment, that a percentage of that we will retain for ourselves and give the rest to the original judgment creditor. So that was the process that we engaged in. Now, you also need to understand that judgment collection in general is governed by the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the FDCPA, which really started sprouting very strong legs in the late 90s, early aughts, because it used to be that in this industry, judgment collection, there was a great deal of harassment and inappropriate measures that were employed by various unethical judgment execution companies, where they would threaten, harass people, curse them out, tell them to have them thrown in jail, and there was a lot of illicit practices. During the course of time, the FDCPA started getting stronger and stronger teeth to try and dial back those companies. And it ended up becoming something that there was not a day that went by that when we were in operation, and we were operating for 5 years, that the FDCPA was ignored or in any way flouted or anything of that nature. There's a lot of requirements, a lot of restrictions, and anyone who came and worked for ROJ at any time, they went through extensive training as to the certain things that you must do when you get on the phone with the debtor, certain things you must say when you get on the phone with the debtor, certain things you must never say to a debtor. And it takes a great deal of time and training to learn how to do it legally in compliance with the FDCPA and also efficiently. Because if you don't do it efficiently, you might as well close your doors. So that's what, so the FDCPA becomes almost like your guidebook as to like, okay, what must we say when we get on the phone with someone? What are we never allowed to say? And this is something we spend a great deal of time training anyone who came in. My role in the company, besides being an owner, is that I served as counsel. So sometimes you have to start a legal action. So I'd file legal action to try and freeze a bank account, or not really freeze a bank account. You don't have to file an action to freeze a bank account, but if you want to, seize a safe deposit box. So there's a whole process you have to go through. So when I first joined ROJ, which is the acronym that we always refer to it as. So when I first joined ROJ, I spent a great deal of time familiarizing myself with the FDCPA and the aspects of the CPLR, which dictate judgment execution. We did this and we were fairly successful, I want to say for roughly 4.5 years or so, without any major incidents. When I say any major incident, I think there might have been one time someone filed a complaint, I think, and that complaint was summarily dismissed. But there's really, that's a remarkable record when you consider that we're working on thousands of judgments, because when you see someone's assets, you've locked down someone's bank account, which greatly disturbs their life. They are very angry at you. They are very, very angry at you, as you can well imagine. And they want to try and get you in trouble. But we prided ourselves on working with exceptional ethics, where we're going to be aggressive in trying to do our job to execute the judgment, but never being in any way derogatory, in any way. If anything, we were exceedingly sympathetic. Here's a kicker that would come up a lot, right? You lock down a bank account and the person files for bankruptcy. They file for bankruptcy. The law is inviolate. You must stop all execution efforts. Boom, on the spot. We always would. I'm saying is like we were very, very careful in making sure that we're FDCPA compliant, because frankly, we were terrified of the FDCPA. Because it's not simply that there are statutory punishments. It's not simply that there's you have to pay for emotional damages and any other consequential damages. You also have to pay their legal fees if, in fact, you're found guilty of violating the FDCPA. So the cost for violating the FDCPA is excessive and exceedingly prohibitive, which is why, frankly, that was the biggest factor in saying we're never stepping out of line with the FDCPA. In or around October, November 2017, so going back 7 years now, there was a company that came to us that told us they wanted to buy ROJ from us. And they made us a handsome offer. at first they wanted to, we ended up haggling back and forth. And our staff was a relatively skeletal staff. I'm handling the legal end of things. Sean is handling like the business end of things. And then we had an office manager who was basically handling most of the day-to-day. Our office manager, like everyone who worked there, but she was the most highly trained out of anyone who worked there. She knew the business backwards and forwards. So we got this offer to purchase ROJ in or around October, which we signed a contract around, I want to say October of 2017. I think that's right. Part of the agreement that we came to was we would be training the purchasers. We were selling them the assets of the company, basically giving them control of all of the judgments that were assigned to us. And we would also spend 3 months training them how to do what we do as effectively as we did it. So there was an extensive training period that was ongoing, and we were supposed to close on the sale in January 2018. So there's one other. So that was our contract period there between October 2017 and January 2018. Now, there's a couple of things I need to mention also. ROJ sent out thousands of letters. The letters that were designed to have legal backing behind them would have the name of my law office, which I call Law Office of J. Henry Neerman, initial J. Henry Neerman, which that was just something that I used because I thought, well, that sounds cool. So that's, my name is Joseph Henry Neerman. So I was like, all right, I saw someone else who had like initial C something, like whatever. And I was like, I kind of like that first initial middle name thing. J. Henry Neerman sounds kind of powerful. So I was like, why don't I just use that? I generally went around by Law Office of J. Henry Neerman, and there was a stamp with my signature that I had authorized the office manager to use. Like I said, she was very highly trained. She knew what she was doing, and there would be on any given day hundreds of letters that are going out. So just take my stamp and go. So many letters went out from ROJ during that 5-year period that I'm not exaggerating when I tell you we went through at least 10 stamps that were just worn out of my signature. Stamp. I would regularly go through the letters, make sure everything is up to par, up to snuff, and that everything was being done properly. But I certainly didn't see every letter that went out, nor did I feel it was incumbent upon me to do so. Perhaps on that I was wrong. I mean, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that's a standard that you have a system in place there. But well, we're coming to the crux of the story here. One of the judgments that was assigned to ROJ was this judgment. I'm going to share this judgment with you because some people have impugned my integrity and claim that, well, you'll see why. This is a judgment that was assigned to us. It's a transcript of a judgment that was, the original judgment creditor was Matt Morrison and Andy Yen. They assigned the judgment to us. They had a judgment against this individual, Shaw Levy. And this was entered in 2010, March 11, 2010. And it was in the housing courts, in the civil court of the city of New York. Judgment is for the amount of $8,740. As far as I'm aware, not that I'm in control of ROJ anymore, as far as I'm aware, this judgment is still not satisfied. I don't know if any penny of it has ever been satisfied. And we'll come back to this judgment in a moment. This judgment there was nothing particularly memorable about this judgment. Like I said, it was one of thousands that had been assigned to us. During that period of October to January, so we were working with a skeletal staff because every day or every other day, our office manager was spending hours a day training the purchasers on how to do judgment execution legally and in compliance with FDCPA while still being effective at it, not being thoroughly neutered so you don't get anything done. During this time, a letter went out to Shaul Levy with a subpoena attached to it. A subpoena is a document which is demanding that you answer questions about various assets you have, bank accounts, things of that nature. And demanding that if properly served, that he must comply with that subpoena and appear. I think the date of the return was December 26th, 2017. And if not, he could be held in contempt and potentially fined and imprisoned or something to that nature. That was like the cover letter, which had my stamp on it. I don't know that this letter went out because I saw this letter. Nobody remembers sending this letter, but it's indisputable that the letter looks like the type of letters that went out from ROJ. His attorney claims that he called me in or around November or December complaining of the letter, saying there's no judgment, that's a fictional judgment, accusing me of being some sort of shady judgment execution company that's literally making up that we have judgments that we don't have for the purpose of trying to squeeze money out of people, and citing other deficiencies in the letter. You're not allowed to send a letter interstate. He's in Florida. You're not allowed to send a letter interstate of this nature, and basically saying that the letter was an FDCPA violation. So, but I don't recall this conversation. I don't rule this conversation out because I've had conversations. I probably had several dozen conversations like that with different attorneys. He claims I told him that I would forward him a copy of the judgment and that I never did. I don't know if that does sound like the sort of thing that I said. I said, if I told you that, if I had that conversation with you, I can tell you this. I certainly told you that we are not going to take any steps to try and enforce that letter. Meaning, it's not like we're saying that letter and now we're going to send a marshal to arrest him if he doesn't come in here. And that I said, if I said this, because I know I've had this conversation a couple of times, I would have said to you, don't worry about the letter. And we're not going to take any steps to enforce it, and relax. And just pretend it never happened. They did not pretend it never happened. That's not what happened. We closed on the sale of the company in around I think mid to late January of 2018. And a couple months later, I was served personally with a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, for alleging that basically we made up this judgment and we sent them this letter, which is not compliant with the FDCPA. And that's an FDCPA violation, and that he has all sorts of emotional distress and terrible, terrible distress. His life has been in utter disarray ever since he received that terrible, terrible letter. And his whole life is in turmoil now. So I said, this is nonsense. This doesn't make any sense. But one issue I had is I didn't have malpractice insurance. And that's on me. But I didn't. So what do? I'm like, well, I have to answer this. So I answer. I start defending it. I forwarded him a copy of the judgment. I pointed out to him that with statutory interest that automatically attaches to a judgment, it's actually like the amount of the judgment as of now is like $15,000. And that he was wrong for making, in the complaint, he alleges that I made up the complaint, that he never heard of these creditors, that the whole thing is fictional, that the whole thing is garbage, it's a lie, and that I'm just trying to steal money from him, and that I'm some shady judgment execution company. Now, when I showed you that judgment earlier, one thing I did not point out to you, which takes a moment, you have to, even if you're an attorney, it takes a moment to actually notice this. There are a lot of different kinds of judgments. The most common type of judgment in the world is the judgment on default. What's a judgment on default? Someone serves a summoning complaint. There's not a timely answer to the complaint. They go to the court and they say, here's a copy of someone's complaint. Here's the affidavit of service proving that they were properly served and that more than enough time has elapsed, that more than the statutory period of time for them to respond has lapsed. And accordingly, I'm asking you to enter judgment on default. Depending on what jurisdiction you're in and the nature of the court, there's going to be different procedures as to how you get that default judgment. For many default judgments, there's a great deal of sympathy to the debtor because you're like, maybe they never got it. Maybe they never saw it. They didn't know anything about it. Now you're also going to hit them with this crazy judgment of thousands of dollars, something like that, which is why in the state of New York, as I'm sure is the case in every jurisdiction in the country, there are all sorts of different measures that are put into place to allow someone who's unaware of default judgment to vacate that default judgment and get a chance to defend themselves in court. The language in the state of New York is that there is a strong public policy in favor of adjudication on merit. A strong public policy, meaning that the courts are really pushed really hard, that it's our public policy in favor of, that we should try and get adjudication, meaning a court to decide something on merit, meaning based on the facts deserve it, rather than on default. So under CPLR 5015A and also CPLR 317, those are two different statutes of the CPLR that someone can move to vacate a default judgment. And an application to vacate default judgment, if timely, by timely it means that you move within a year of learning of it, you're likely going to succeed. And you have to submit an affidavit that you didn't know about. You have a good faith defense, and you'll get the default judgment vacated. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I don't know, in New York, perhaps millions of default judgments out there. So the first thought I had is, maybe this was default judgment and he really didn't know anything about it. No. If you look at this judgment, it was made in housing court, and you look at this judgment a little closer, it says, decision and judgment is rendered based upon a stipulation entered into by the parties as follows. What does this mean? It means that this was in housing court. Mr. Levy was a tenant. Presumably, his landlord claimed that he had not paid his rent and was looking to evict him. And they entered into a stipulation where he, or perhaps his attorney, or some other person acting on his behalf, went into court and negotiated this. This is not a default judgment. This is not something he was unaware of. He was able to stay in his apartment, and presumably, because it seemed like he was able to stay there for a couple months extra. And the most likely scenario, I wasn't there. Like I said, this was assigned to us. I didn't have the original judgment. I mean, I wasn't there when it was originally entered. The most likely scenario, given my experience in litigation, is there was an eviction proceeding. They haggled over how much money is there and how soon he's going to get out. And he said, I'll pay you $8,700 and agree to have judgment entered against me for $8,700. And you let me stay here for another month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. That's the type of negotiations that happen in housing court all the time. The reason this is significant in this context is because this is a guy who's suing me in court in 2017, claiming that this judgment never happened. He never heard of these. He never heard of these judgment creditors. Doesn't know who they are, and that I made up this entire thing, and that I've basically thrown his life into utter turmoil. I was like, you have to be kidding me. This guy he must be out of his freaking mind. He never heard of them. They're his freaking landlord. He entered into stipulation. He negotiated this. It's not a default judgment that he didn't know what happened. He negotiated this freaking judgment. He agreed to it. And now he has the audacity to come into court and start saying that I made this up. Unbelievable. I was really outraged. So what I did was I started defending it. But you know what they say? An attorney represents himself as a fool for a client. So I said, let me bring someone on board here who'll take over, because there were 3 defendants named. There was me individually, then they named law offices of J. Henry Neerman, and then they named recovery of judgment. They named me individually because my signature was on this. Now, bear in mind, I never saw this letter. I didn't even know this letter went out. I couldn't deny the fact when I saw it, but to me, I don't think it complies with the FDCPA. I recognize that. So there's one letter that went out that's not compliant with the FDCPA. And it went out during a period of time when everything was completely haphazard in ROJ, because our office manager was busting her tail, doing a phenomenal job of training other people on how to execute judgments. And one way or another, this letter went out. And it shouldn't have. So now, I end up trying to negotiate with them. I offered to, and I basically pointed out, I was like, even with, I said, because at this point in time, their claims against me were for like, I don't know, $13,000. It's like, I'm not paying you $13,000 for some letter that went out that never should have gone out. I mean, you can laugh at that now when you see how big the judgment is. You say, you fool, you should have. But 2020, hindsight's always 2020. And I was like, I'm going to get this thing dismissed. This is crazy. This guy's making up lies that he doesn't know anything about this judgment. And this is a one-time accident that is ridiculous. It didn't do anything to him. It had no impact on him. He called his lawyer 2 days later. And I'm sure his lawyer told him, don't worry about it. I'm sure his lawyer did, because his lawyer's not an idiot. So there was no aggravation and stress going on for months and months or whatever. Ridiculous. I contacted a friend of mine who was an attorney named Barry Schneps. And this guy is a holy, holy man. And a longtime friend of the family. And I said, can you step in and represent ROJ on this? And I'll represent myself individually. And this way I have someone like oversee my papers and, you know, work it that way. And that way I feel like I don't have a fool for a client. And this case went on and on and on. We moved for summary judgment. I think it was like during when COVID hit, everything got put on hold for like a year. I remember that during COVID lockdowns, at one point, I was in a mediation discussion with the magistrate judge and the other attorneys. And I was like, I don't have any money. Like, I don't know what you want. I don't even, what's your end game here? Because during COVID, I had no clients at all. Like, everything dried up. So I was like, I don't know what your end game is here. Like, what are you looking for? The first time we went into court, Judge Roman said to them don't think that this is some big case. Based on what I see in the complaint here, this is really very small. This is a very small case. That was the first appearance that we had there. We went through discovery, and then we had motions for summary judgments. Judge Roman spent a year and a half from when it was definitely more than a year. And this was during lockdown period and stuff like that. It was definitely more than a year that he spent sitting on our opposing motions summary judgment. I was looking to dismiss. They were looking to get summary judgment on liability to say that I'm at fault. And what they're basically saying is, look, he admits he sent the letter. Look at the letter. The letter's a violation of FDCPA. Liability. So then he ends up finding in their favor. It says he admits he sent the letter. His office sent the letter, and even though he didn't do it, that since he had authorized his staff to use his stamp, so he's personally liable. By now, their legal fees that they were demanding of me was well over $100,000. And here's the thing. I kept trying to talk to them, trying to negotiate, wrap this thing up. They were so aggressive in their demands. I mean, so thoroughly aggressive in their demands that it was insane. It was like I was talking to a wall. There was just like nothing, like, it's like, no, they were literally going to squeeze any possible penny out of it. After that decision, after the judge issued summary judgment against me on liability, so this was around, I want to say 2021. At this point in time, this is when I started losing sleep. This is when I started, I spent months, and I didn't even talk to Lady Lawgic about it. I had this burning inner, like, consuming thing where I was like, I couldn't sleep. I was like, I'm going to get hit with the judgment here. I don't even know. By the time everything's said, it's going to be $150,000. So I was very freaked out about this. And I was like, you know what? I want to find some real counsel here to step in here. Or maybe can, like, resolve this and make sure that my damages aren't going to be as exorbitant as what they seem to be looking for. So I hired an attorney who seemed pretty competent. And he's like, yeah, I dealt with these guys before. They're very aggressive. And before I hired them, I even reached out to the other side. And I was like, look, I'm about to give them a healthy retainer agreement and hire counsel. I'd rather use that money and pay you and settle this thing. And I made an initial offer, said, please get back to me. No response. It was basically a big F you. So I hired the lawyer. We had a hearing. At the hearing, this was to assess damages. What the judge found $500 in statutory damages because the violation itself says that there's supposed to be some sort of statutory damages. So we had a hearing to assess whether or not he had actual damages. Now, my lawyer told me that he had found a case called TransUnion, which was actually supposed to be very encouraging. TransUnion is a case which said that in order for you to get hit with legal fees, there has to be actual damages. And actual damages don't just mean that you actually that you're just like crying, but you have to actually get therapy, get some other thing, get some, it has to be manifest that this affected you if it's just emotional damages. You got counseling. He didn't have anything. He never went to counseling, never anything. There's no evidence that he spent 10 seconds thinking about it. He got up there at the hearing, and frankly, his testimony seemed about as credible as Amber Heard. Thereabouts. His wife got up and testified, and to be fair, she was far more compelling. Crying about how she was worried about like how he was taking it and that he was going to commit suicide, or I didn't say that word on YouTube. Please don't ever think about doing something like that. That would be a terrible thing for anyone to ever do, no matter who you are, even if you're Sean Levy. But and I mean that seriously. Don't ever think about doing anything like that. Please don't ding me for this, YouTube. Okay, so basically talking about like all sorts of, self-harm we might engage in, terrible stuff. And she seemed, frankly, more credible, more sympathetic. I think she even cried a little bit. I watched the testimony. I was like, gosh, this is not good. This is not good. This is not good. So, but then we had this TransUnion case, and just crying about emotional damage is not like supposed to be something that you're supposed to get money for. And this is where things got like a little bit wonky. So my lawyer said he wanted to bring a motion to have the case dismissed and get no legal fees because there's no showing of emotional damages. Judge Roman decided, we heard the motion, and he decided that there can be legal fees if he incurred legal fees. So, because these lawyers charged him $500 up front, now they're able to collect all of their legal fees from me. Yep. Total amount of legal fees at this point are well over $200,000 for this letter. $200,000. Magistrate judge comes up and says, all right, I'm going to shave that number back. I'm going to take off 45% here. Oh, I forgot to mention my legal fees, because I'm telling you right now, I couldn't sleep. So that's why I hired, and for like the first time, like for the last 2 years, I've had these guys working for me. And I've done everything I can to never think about this case. To never think about it. Because I was like, this is just, like, why would I want to dwell on that? And at the end of the day, all of my money comes directly from God. I know it looks like it comes from you. And yeah, I mean, I certainly appreciate your beneficence. But your inclination to give me money, that's from God. So, yeah. So she ended up coming up with this $117,000 figure, which she recommends to the actual judge. Roman is the one who has to enter it. We have a chance to dispute that or not. And my lawyer said to me, look, I already paid out to him $30,000, $40,000. Part of it was picked up by Sean. He's like, we can fight it. If I fight it, then he could bump that number up. If we don't fight it, then it's not going to get bumped up. You got a 45% shave off the $200,000. I can appeal it. If I appeal it, it's going to cost you another $20,000 just for me to file the appeal. I have no idea if you're going to win. I don't know. I certainly can't promise you that. And my recommendation is at this point, stop the bleeding. And sit back. The judgment's going to come. And deal with that. And so it was. So I knew it was coming. And I'll tell you this. Am I happy about it? No. Do I feel as if this is like complete injustice? Yeah. This is insane. I'm not angry at I'm really not angry at the judge or my lawyers. I think that the way the law is drafted is ridiculous. I think it's insane. I'm not crazy about his decision saying that you can still attach legal fees, which this apparently was new law that I created. Go me. It's new law I created. And I feel like, I don't know if it's like really settled in that I got hit with this judgment. Like sometimes I'll like sort of think about it and I'll try to like clear it out of my head. And I sort of look at it like, look, at the end of the day, does it suck? Yeah, it's not a good thing. No one wants that. no one wants this. And yet I feel very, very appreciative to God for giving me this judgment. I feel very, very appreciative to God for giving me this judgment. I want to publicly thank God for giving me this judgment. You know, part of what I do here, where I come into your room and I'm talking to thousands of you at a time, ends up establishing this kind of unusual type of relationship where many of you will feel a certain connection to me and you'll share things, which I find very humbling and very flattering. Sometimes very personal things, but like very painful things that you're dealing with. And they are far bigger challenges than money. People dealing with death, people dealing with disease, people dealing with children, drug issues, imprisonment, children who are having all sorts of difficulties. I mean, I hear some terrible stories. And we all need challenges to grow. You don't grow without challenges. And of all the nature of different kinds of challenges that man can have, and I know that some of you who are dealing with, massive money struggles, you're going to think I'm crazy for saying this. But a money challenge, a money struggle, compared to any of those things I was just describing, is a joke. I mean, it's a joke. People dealing with cancers or heart issues or liver issues, people dealing with kids who have all sorts of different difficulties or autism or other stuff like that. It's like to worry about like money. Money comes, money goes. And nobody knows that better than me. So like, I mean, I know that, money is my income is completely irrelevant to the quality of work that I produce. So yeah, for me, I'm like, thank you, God, that I have all the challenges in the world to give me a challenge with respect to a ridiculously huge judgment. God bless you. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, no one wants to have challenges, but I am thrilled that the nature of challenge is money every time. I'll take that every time. So, yeah. So that's the story. Then when I see like people saying that like, oh, Joe was committing fraud and like he was found guilty of fraud, I'm like, look at the freaking judgment. They ended up giving him, based on probably the wife's testimony, $8,000 of his for his purported emotional damage, and $100,000 in legal fees. Do you think that sounds like that the court thinks I did something really terrible here? It's like, just like, use your brain. But I understand that people enjoy farming Schadenfreude, which I think is actually kind of sad. I think that that's actually a sickness. Like, if you're trying to, like, basically, like, take glee in someone else's misfortune that doesn't benefit you in any way, shape, or form. I think that's someone who's never happy. That's someone who's that's someone who's very miserable with their own lot, and, like, trying to find some sort of relief from that misery by pointing at someone else's misery. And I'm not talking about, like, my story. I'm talking about in general concept of Schadenfreude, or people who are trying to market towards, like, hey, let's look at this story of this person who's, like, dealing with some real trouble. I'm like, are you out of your freaking mind? What the hell's wrong with you? There's something very sad. There's something very disturbingly wrong with you that like, you're getting joy from that, or you're trying to encourage others to watch you so that they will get joy from seeing that. It's like, this is perverse. This is sick. It's really sick. It's a twisted mindset, which is reflective of someone who's actually very, very miserable. So, anyway, I don't want this to be something that I'm talking about on a regular basis. I don't know what steps I'm going to have to do to deal with this judgment yet. I really haven't even contemplated that. I don't know what steps I'm going to take. If that's whatever. And I'm sure that there are going to be some comments on this stream. I'm going to face from time to time people dropping hate on me. First time I saw someone reference this was like a year and a half ago on a comment to a stream I did, nothing to do with anything. Some hater put something up, like, referencing, like, Levy v. Newman, and I was like, oh wow, this is not good. I was like, if this becomes a judgment, this isn't going to be good. So, but I really didn't want it to be. I don't want this to be something that I'm talking about on a regular basis. And with respect to how I feel about it, look, there are times I feel kind of, like, bummed about it, but for the most part, I feel very, very grateful to God. And I know that at the end of the day, look, I wouldn't be remotely shocked. I have no idea if a year from now, I have zero clue if a year from now I'll be destitute or worth $10 million. There's a significant chance it'll be somewhere between there. But that's how variant my income potential is. So it's like, at the end of the day, I understand it's completely in God's hands how much money I end up bringing in. And my objective is feed my family, keep a roof over our heads, make sure everyone's happy. And whatever happens beyond that is just gravy. So that is the story. Any questions? All right. A ship in the Middle East mysteriously lost track of 5,000 doorbells that have been programmed to play dreidel. That is kind of weird. As a highly flawed digger, Joe, I'll be here. My not leader, you're the best. F the haters, you didn't do nothing. Diggers unite. Thank you. You're very kind. Sounds like a lawsuit against Dominion. They did not obey contracts to Tatum False Claims Act 31 USC 3730. If FAC is federal law, may have claim. The voting system they're using doesn't store in compliance with FIPS 140-2. That rings a bell. That sounds right. So it can't possibly be the same system that was certified. Yeah, but the thing is, they could change their system completely, and that's totally fine. Under the way that Judge McAfee is reading this statute, it's like, you just have to certify, and now you're done. Don't even, you sign a contract and you're done. They claim the judgment could be found. He claimed he couldn't find it. He says he told me he couldn't find it, and the reason he probably could not find it, to be fair to the lawyer, when you search civil courts, So housing court is a completely different division, and all the records there would not be you could search. If you search for the names in civil courts, you won't find it in New York civil courts. You have to go to New York civil court housing division to find it. So if he didn't realize it was a housing thing because his client never told him that, because his client, the most likely scenario here is that the client lied to the lawyer. So the lawyer, I assume that the lawyer would not write something in bad faith. So the most likely thing is he lied to him and said, I don't know who they are. So, but if his lawyer, if his client had said to him, oh yeah, it was my landlord, then he would go straight to the housing court. OMG, the letter of attorney stamp was a fact pattern of a question I had on the MPRE. There you go. There you go. Well, did you check the judgment was in the court system? It wasn't. It's in the court system. It's a different court system. The lesson here for Chad is get insurance. Amen. Someone sell you a fake judgment. No. No one sold us a fake judgment. It's a real judgment. It's still in existence today. It's still in existence today, as far as I know. I don't know. Maybe we got satisfied since this thing got started. Maybe Recovery Judgment succeeded in getting it. I don't know. Because like I said, we sold our assets. God bless you, Todd Larson. Thank you. Does your 20-year-old partner in RJ have to pay half? It's a good question. So at a certain point in time, RJ has no assets anymore. We sold all our assets. So there's no assets there. I'm not going to go after him for the money. I'm not going to press him for the money. I have no intention of suing him. And I could have brought him in as a co-defendant. I never did. At a certain point in time, for various he's not going to be legally on the hook. When I started getting hit with these legal bills to pay my lawyer, so I was like, look, I already shelled out like $10K on this. Can you kick in? And he kicked money in. I think he kicked in like 15 or so. And he has not been shunning me out. Like if he wanted to, he could just like sort of just block my calls. You know, I'm not, because he knows I'm not going to sue him. It's not my nature that I'm going to sue him. And I think I actually signed off that I wouldn't sue him at a certain point. But even if I didn't have to sign that, I still would never sue him. That's not what I'm going to do. So I told him that 117 judgment was coming. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen with this. And he's not 20 anymore. He's 30 now. He got married and has kids now. So time to Florida text, let them chase you into his haven. Why no opposition when judge reviewed the magistrate? So my lawyer thought that he was basically saying, if you put in opposition, they'll have an opportunity to put in opposition also, and they might get the 40, instead of getting a 45% haircut on their demanded legal bills, it might end up costing me money. Plus, I know that there's an out-of-pocket that I'm going to spend time, I'm going to spend money on my lawyer. So think about this for a second, okay? If I pay my lawyer $15,000 and then the judge takes off $20,000, is that really a win? Maybe he'll take off $20,000. You know, see what I'm saying? It's like at a certain point, it's like I need to just stop this bleeding. I need to stop this bleeding. So to give him $15,000, hoping he's going to take off $20,000, the judge will take off $20,000, doesn't make sense. So just like I need to stop this bleeding. They should. That's what take me tunnels to Florida, Texas. Century Bro, God bless you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys. We have Garth Brooks' trial to look forward to. JD 2.0. Judgment paid off in no time. Bingo, bango. Bingo, bango. There you go. The main thing in this conversation, you try to sell us in advance, they didn't want to settle it. Pretty much. When my lawyer talked to them, he's like, I've never seen anyone be so ridiculously aggressive. And he's like, they think you're wealthy. And I was like, why? Why would they? This is the stupidest thing in the world. Why would they even like? He's like, no, they think you're really wealthy. I was like, this is how would someone reach that conclusion? They're like, no, they think you're worth like millions. I was like, really? Okay. I think most of us know you well enough by now to know this is not something malicious. Dig stuff your back. Wish I could give more. You're too kind, Big Boop. You know, you're very sweet. Thank you. Don't worry about whatever. Like I said, this is like money issues are like such a joke compared to like other issues that people are dealing with. So many issues I hear about that they really rip my heart. And I try to give like some sort of like, guidance and stuff like that. As someone that has had many money challenges in their life, I appreciate you sharing your perspective with us, Joe. You're the man, buddy. Thank you. Remember, for 8 months. Sorry if you're mad, but I booted more people tonight than ever before combined. It wasn't dealing with the trolling while you were laying yourself bare. We got your back. I'm totally cool with that. I knew there would be some people in the chat like that. I knew there'd be some. They've been just. It's like, what the hell's wrong with it? It's like. That's why I said I know there's gonna be when you go down to the comments. If you're watching this after, I'm sure there are a ton of comments. People saying you're boob, terrible lawyer, whatever, crook. They're gonna scream whatever they want to scream. Let them scream what they want. I felt it was only fair. You know what? It was really someone who's been a long time fan of the show who said, "Hey, I saw this stream about you. I would just like say it ain't so." And I was like, I don't know how many people out there have seen something that they never. If I don't lay my side out there, then it's like, why wouldn't you just assume that I'm just embarrassed by this or whatever? I'm really not even embarrassed by this story. I'm just like, I didn't want to spend a whole night talking about it, but I was like, now I have to because otherwise people are gonna just assume the worst. So, but I appreciate you cleaning out the chat tonight. We know you. We trust and believe in you, Joe. Grifter YouTubers aren't going to change the hell. If anything, I want to give you more money now. Pay this BS off faster. Thank you. Thank you very much. And by the way, one of the reasons I didn't want to do this because I didn't want to look like I was like looking for like a pity thing. So I'm like, I genuinely believed every penny I get comes from God. It's like I don't need to. I'm not going to do that. I'm not. It's like it is what it is. And there's so many different sources of revenue that can come in beyond super chats or stuff like that. But it's like you get a video that goes viral, and it can be more than this judgment. You can make more from. It's crazy how much money there is to be made in this. So that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, it's a nuisance. It gives me a headache. But it's like I'm not gonna sit here. I'm not going to sit here like crying about it or like being angry. It's just like the worst I'll get is like sometimes I'll just like go through like I'll feel like bummed for like a half hour. Like, man, this sucks. But yeah, that's a far easier challenge than any of the ones I was outlining earlier. So thank you, Nicole. As a wheelchair user, I'd happily pay $170,000 to be able to walk again. Though this is the challenge I was giving my God. Local super chat also. Yeah, that's my point. Exactly, Ann. Yeah, exactly. It's a joke. That's what I'm saying is like, $100,000 a lot of money? Of course it is. But as far as like different challenges people have, money challenges are always a joke because so many of these different challenges, you'd be like, oh my God, I would give every penny in the world not to have that problem. So instead of having that problem, I basically have to give up every penny in the world. So yeah, I'll make that trade. I'm good with that. I'm good with that. Hello, Dora. Just dropping some check on the sense of love. Thank you, TTT. You're too kind. Speaking with your signature on it, is that a common thing? Because that's what bothers me the most. It's a cover letter on a subpoena. It's a cover letter on top of the subpoena. That's what it was. Just stamping my signature? Yeah. Like I said, we sent out thousands of letters. We went through 10 rubber stamps. At least 10. At least 10 of my signature. And we never had any problem with anything in 5 years. And we were successful enough, we ended up selling the company off. I mean, before the judgment came in, I made a nice profit off of ROJ when you consider like what my investment was. I think I invested under 10K. And when we sold it, it was for like, I don't know, a couple $100,000. But then there was expenses that had to be covered. What I'm saying is my investment on it, and that's because we did great work. Like we were really good at getting the job done in ways that were completely FTC-EPA compliant. So they used the non-funding in court against your judgment. I don't know what that means. By the way, Joe, do you have a personal umbrella policy with your PNC carrier that can help you? No. No, there's no insurance. There's nothing. There's no insurance. I think yeah, those who are wondering what MPREs, those are your ethics exams. These are ethics exams that we have to take when you get admitted to the bar, is what Winston's referring to. That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. That was pretty funny. God bless you, Thomas. Thank you so much. The other side could oppose magistrate even if you don't. Yeah, but they're less likely to be heard. That is what he told me. How did you know that? It's technically true, but he's like, the judge isn't going to listen to them. If we don't put in opposition, the judge isn't going to listen to them. As it happens, they didn't. They didn't put in anything. So, Brian Oldenkamp, God bless you. Thank you so much, brother. And you want to be my latex. Nice. $170K, that's 1 year yeshiva tuition. Pretty much. Pretty much. Good to see you, Shia. You can make some extra money selling beepers, I hear. You have to build a good customer base, but yeah, that's probably true. There's a new market that's opened up for that. I have had money issues in past judgments, but it was money I owed to vendors, so I just had to pay over time. Yeah, I think we heard this before. I think I'm feeling. I think you're not talking about. I don't think you're talking about. You're not talking about my partner, Sean, right? He's actually been really nice. I know you're referring to a different Sean, not the one I was talking about my story. So, anyhow, so there you go. Oh, I should check out. Let me check out. I had a Christian Reactor friend watch your explanation of the holidays. He honestly enjoys learning about other religions. Oh, cool. Cool. Oh, I should check out over here. Let's see what we got. Yeah, it's true. I did get $100 out of this story, Jacob. It's not really the right way to make money. It's not a good strategy. Trust me. Get here with $100,000 judgment so you can collect. You can have a good night in super chats. It's not a sound long-term strategy. It's not at all a sound long-term strategy. So. Most forums, including copyright trolls, never put lawyer signatures, just firm names. Wait, what do you want? This is not on the subpoena. It was a letter. It was a letter. Thank you, Ciel. That's very kind of you. All right. I think I'm landing my plane here. I think it's time for me to sort of bring it on down. Bring it on down. I really appreciate the words of encouragement and generous support you guys have always given me. You guys are really amazing. So, I looked at locals tips. It was just Anne. I had a Christian reactive friend watch your explanation of holidays. He honestly enjoys learning about other religions. There's a link there for a YouTube thing.
Reaction/review of this is let me see what
he features me. All right, we can do this. I'm good with that. We can watch this. I see what you're saying now. All right, let's see what we got here.
Come here. You're now rocking with the greatest, reacting to the old and reacting to the latest. Every single genre that's Birdman's taste.
I don't know if this is going to give me like a thing. So.
Thank you for stopping on in. Ladies and gentlemen, you have tuned in to yet another reaction/review video. And we're going to dig right in. But first things first, I'm going to need you to do something for me. Follow me on twitch.com/bird. Holidays is what it's called. So hold on before I just start talking. This is an explanation of holidays is what it's called. So cool. Let's see what this is all about. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, there's really only one thing left to do.
Inception time.
Let's get it.
Awesome. And Lashana Toby did a quick 1-2 sentence summary of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur the other day. I can't find it. Can you please redo it? My new friends are confused and my explanations suck. Okay, it's really very simple. I'll break it down very simple. Okay. Rosh Hashanah is the new year. So we believe the year we use a lunar calendar. So which basically lunar calendar works with the waxing and waning of the moon. So the moon basically disappears. And I forgot to turn off my my incoming calls in a second here. And then reappears when it starts to reappear, we consider it the start of a new month. So and every 12 or 13 months, depending on the year. This past year was actually 13 months because we have an extra month during we have a very complicated 19-year cycle in order to keep the lunar calendar seasonally consistent with the solar calendar, so that Passover comes out in the spring every year, rather than because the lunar calendar is 354 days instead of the solar calendar, which is 365 days. It's 11 days shorter. So if you do the math there, so that means if you start on the same day in year one, oh my gosh, I lost him. All right, well that's good. That's unfortunate. I'll call him back. I'll call JJ back. I'll call you back when I'm done with this.
Feels weird.
Anyway, bottom line is the lunar calendar is 11 days shorter than solar calendar. So if you every year, whatever day you're on in the lunar calendar, next year is going to come out 11 days earlier. So what today is October 1st, or now I guess it's turned October 2nd. Whatever day you have on the lunar calendar now, next year is going to come out. It's going to come out on September 21st. So, And the next year will come out September 10th. And the next year will come out in August. So we sort of adjusted by adding an extra month. Anyway, the difference, Rosh Hashanah is the start of a new year. We don't look at a new year as time for celebration and parties. We look at the new year as time of reflection. So Rosh Hashanah, we actually look at it as a time that we celebrate God and recognize his dominion over the earth.
Amen.
And it's time for us to begin to really start embracing that through that recognition of God, that we should start to repent for turning away from God over the past year. We actually start this period of penance a month ago. And our penance grows more and more intense. So basically, Rosh Hashanah, you sort of look at it as our annual coronation of recognition of God as being King of the universe. And there's a lot of prayer. Much of the day is basically prayer or eating. That's basically what we do on Rosh Hashanah. It happens to go right into Sabbath, so it ends up being like 3 days in a row that we end up not working because we have 2 days of the New Year and then Sabbath. 10 days after the start of Rosh Hashanah is the day called Yom Kippur, which is Day of Atonement. That's a day that we spend fasting, and we don't eat or drink anything for a 25-hour period, and that is intense. And we believe that that's when God basically is looking for us to intense prayer is what I meant to say, to engage in serious atonement. So that's why this period here, and this period of that 10 days is considered a period of penance. And yeah.
So these are the Jewish,
it's very different from like
beliefs, explanations of holidays.
Screaming Happy New Year. That's not, we wish each other well, and we believe that we're actually, through our penance, we are actually
always good to learn other religions,
praying, and that God is deciding what type of fate we're going to have over the forthcoming year, what type of outcomes we're looking at, who's going to live, who's going to die, who's going to have children, who's going to grow wealthy, who's going to get sickness, and that basically that is inscribed on the Jewish New Year, and that inscription is sealed on Yom Kippur, and that's why we do penance, basically looking to have a better year. And that we're not just praying for ourselves individually, but they're actually praying for the well-being of the entire world. It's not just of ourselves individually or our families, but it's our community and a greater community, and actually for the well-being of the entire planet.
Hey.
So, and that's sort of what we accept as what our challenge is, to try and fulfill that mantle. So, yeah, that's what Rosh Hashanah is. If you ask me personally, I'll just say this, based on everything I've learned, I don't think when we say that something is sealed, I don't believe that it's predetermined, everything is predetermined for the forthcoming year. I actually believe that there's a different range of outcomes, and that range can be like over here, it can be over here, it can be over here. There's a lot of different ranges, and that God sort of like determines your range depending on how you're going to act during the forthcoming year. Because I do believe that God recognizes you can do penance during the course of the year. I'm Joe Nierman, and I approve this message in that sort of way. But still, where the range is highly significant. So there you go. And Lesko says blah 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 Jew. There you go.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So good explanation of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Very cool. No, always good to learn other religions, learn a little information about it. So very, very cool. I dig it.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Follow me on social media. My links are right down here. If you'd like to be a member of the flock on Patreon, get some exclusive content.
I thought there was going to be more feedback than that. I wasn't going to watch myself saying that. I thought I was going to get a whole bunch of feedback. I didn't get much, but I'm glad he enjoyed it. It's not too late to head to Mexico and start. I guess it's never too late for that, right? Well, 100K spent over $100 nights is only 1,000 nights. Yes, that's 3 years. Ugh. And then I'm still 17,000 plus interest short. But yeah, Birdman won't strike you. No, I was worried about the music. That whoever owns that music is going to strike me. I don't know if it's his or not. Honeybee Care says, should the production of the valid judgment and cause dismissal and validation of the judgment, how can you be held this liable for a valid action just because the lawyer couldn't find the judgment is on him, not you? No, technically the cover letter that I put there and sending him that subpoena by mail was an FDCPA violation. So, yeah, even if he came in there and said, yeah, that judgment is real, but this is an FDCPA violation, I would have been held just as liable. So it's not because he couldn't find the judgment. I personally believe if he had found the judgment initially, I don't think he would have moved forward with the case. I think he was looking to like make an example out of me because he thought I was some shady guy who's like ripping people off. So that's why I'd like to think of the lawyer, that was his motivation. But he knew about this judgment in May of 2018, within 4 months of when he started this thing. I sent him a copy of the judgment, and I'm like, "What are you doing? What are you talking about?" And so, and we spent the last 6.5 years litigating this craziness. Anyway, a bit of a migraine now. So I'm going to be landing my plane. I'm going to be telling you this, God willing, tomorrow evening. I will be back here. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything else. Did I miss anything? Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm landing the plane. It's coming down. It's ready like what? 2:30 in the morning? Yeah. It is time. You know the drill. If you see lab meat, you got to just pick it up on a plate. Make sure you're wearing gloves so none of the gushy stuff leaks onto your fingers. Walk over to the nearest round receptacle, step on the thing, and just drop it all in there. Okay? That's what you do with your lab meat. And no matter how they spice it up, no matter what they tell you, never, ever, ever do not eat the bugs. Have a good night, my friends. And as always, Godspeed.